I'm sorry, our management does not allow us to serve niggers in here.
That's just like white people and niggers. I mean, white people naturally don't like white people better than niggers.
Well, I wasn't raised with them. I never have lived with them, and I'm not going to start now.
These niggers ain't got no business in this school. I'll tell you right now, keep them niggers on their own school. My 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Today, we take our civil rights for granted. We enjoy freedom of speech and the right to follow any religion we choose. If accused of a crime, we have the right to a jury trial and a lawyer's help. It's easy to assume that all Americans are wrapped in a blanket of civil rights. After all, these rights are created and protected by our American Constitution. It is important to remember that the way we define rights is always changing and must be constantly watched. We have a responsibility to make this country all that it is supposed to be. When Thomas Jefferson wrote, "All men are created equal" in the Declaration of Independence, he didn't mean the same thing we mean today. Jefferson didn't include slaves or women or men without property. It's an enormous task to try to ensure equal rights for all Americans. It's an ongoing process of definition. The United States Constitution is the framework for our government, and its intent is to define and preserve the rights of the individual. But it doesn't always work for all Americans. The original framers of the Constitution knew that a changing America would require a Constitution that was both flexible and strong. So they created a Constitution that could be changed, but only with considered effort. Of the many additions or amendments that have been suggested over the years, only a few are now part of the Constitution. The first 10 of these amendments are called the Bill of Rights. They were added to protect the rights of individuals against potentially harmful actions by the federal government. But in 1787 at the Constitutional Convention, the issue was whether these rights resided at the state or federal level.
I draw your attention to the freedoms that we fought the revolution for. Will we not protect religion and free speech in this Constitution?
Gentlemen, I say we need a Bill of Rights written into the Constitution, or... Wait, hold on. I'm sorry.
Cut!
I think that went all right.
Thank God.
No, really, it took a couple of times to get all right, but it went just...
What's the problem?
Look, is it just me, or is this whole scene kind of hard to swallow?
Well, this is a reenactment. This is how we believe it happened.
But these were the people who created the Constitution. Why would they debate over something so simple, so obvious?
Because it wasn't so obvious to them back then. Give me your next line.
Some of the state constitutions have statements of rights. Is that not sufficient?
You're saying that the rights need to be guaranteed by the federal government so that there'll be the same rights for everybody. He's saying leave it up to the individual states because he's afraid that if you spell out a Bill of Rights in the Constitution, that might make the government too powerful, like with King George.
So basically, we're all in agreement to protect rights. We just can't agree on whether to write them into the Constitution.
Right. Okay? Everybody know where they're coming from now? Good. Let's take it from the top. And action!
I draw your attention to the freedoms we fought the revolution for.
You can see why creating a flexible constitution was so important. It provided an orderly means of change. The Constitution went into effect in 1789, and shortly thereafter, in 1791, the Bill of Rights was ratified. The Constitution set up a government of 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. Each of these branches can work to change the Constitution, but none can do it alone. Often, when the branches of government move too slowly, the public may decide to act. You could call public opinion a fourth branch of government. It is a powerful way to influence the executive and legislative branches. You have the right and the responsibility to alert your elected representatives to take action on your behalf. Through them, you can make a difference. You can bring about change. During the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s, public opinion not only influenced the passage of legislation, it also brought about reinterpretation of the Constitution. This movement traces its beginnings as far back as the late 18th century, when John and Paul Cuffe protested taxation without representation and won voting rights for blacks in Massachusetts. Prior to the Civil War, former slaves Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth refused to accept segregated seating in stagecoaches and trains. In 1865, the nation ended slavery with the passage of the 13th Amendment. The ratification of the 14th Amendment in 1868 legally guaranteed equality for all American citizens. Today, this amendment is a cornerstone of our constitutional civil rights, but in 1896, the Supreme Court ruled that separate but equal public facilities did not violate the 14th Amendment. Today, we know these facilities are inherently unequal. People continued to fight for equality. From 1901 to 1905, there were streetcar boycotts in Montgomery, Atlanta, Memphis, Macon, Mobile, and Birmingham. In 1941, A. Philip Randolph's threatened march on Washington helped end job discrimination in war industries. And in 1963, 250,000 people gathered peacefully in the nation's capital and asked the government to help make full rights for all a reality. Men, women, and children just like you used methods that were protected by the Constitution to win their equal rights. Men, women, and children just like you held marches, demonstrated peacefully, gathered petitions, held boycotts, and filed lawsuits. Men, women, and children just like you use these tools to influence legislation, to redefine the traditional notion of whose rights were protected by the Constitution. Men, women, and children just like you struggled to realize a dream of equality.
I have a dream. We will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at